Hi, my name's Azzah, and I'm doing a sequence of interviews called Women's Wisdom. And here's Vadan Ritter, right? Ritter. And Vadan has been, he's an acupuncturist, holistic healer, Sufi practitioner, not just theory, but practicing. For how long?
30 years.
30 years practicing Sufism. So, Vadan, tell me like a little bit of history, you know? When did you, how did you, because Sufism, I was told in India, right, that Sufi, Taoism and the Essenes is the one line, different branches, and it basically means the road, the way in life.
Yes, well, I always think it was interesting that I had such a strong connection to spirituality from a very young age. I think when I was 12 or 13, I told my family I wanted to go live in a Zen monastery, because that was, back then, that was kind of the thing that you knew about. So
you had that feeling inside yourself from a really young age.
When I was about 8 years old, I found this Buddha statue in the 5 and dime store, and I brought it home, and I had and immediately had this deep connection, and so that's what I searched for. I thought that I would find a Buddhist teacher, and then as we all know, life brings to us the thing that we need, and I guess when I was about 17 years old, I went to a workshop on Sufi healing, and that's when I connected personally with the Sufis.
Right. Wow.
And I was drawn to them because they seem to have such a high value on integrating this sort of immense sense of consciousness into their everyday life existence.
So holistic.
Yeah.
Would you use the word holistic?
Absolutely, yeah.
A holistic art. I've written down here, what is holistic art?
And I think the other piece was that I started studying Tai Chi as a teenager, and I went to an alternative school, so we had this, course on Taoism, and I think that the Taoism and the Chinese medicine, I think in a way that is a very deep expression of this holistic paradigm, because it's how everything is interconnected, and how the fullness of life emerges from the void or the emptiness, and how we have to live our lives within these sort of universal laws of nature. It's very like nature mysticism oriented.
Right. Yeah. To the importance, for me, that's so true. The importance of learning universal laws, learn like karma and gravity and time. Universal laws. It's and
how we achieve things in life isn't through force, it's through, blending our energies with how things are moving.
Yeah.
I would say it's, you have to not just go with the social, go with the madness of society, but it's tuning into these
That's
deeper...
going with the force, though, isn't it? Going with the insane social norm at the time is going with the force.
Right, but then there's deeper, more subtle forces they're more connected with the bigger picture.
Yeah, universal laws of energy.
Universal laws of energy.
Yeah.
Holistic paradigm is that, first of all, there's this basic interconnectedness. So we have to, respect everything in the universe. We have to respect the earth and the fabric of the planet, and also we're not individuals. We're connected with each other, and so we don't just get ours and let everyone else suffer, but we have to find ways of elevating and raising the whole humanity.
So how do you imagine that?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with I think the ideas that are out there in the world. I think we need to change our way of thinking, and I think, and not just thinking in the more like in the Chinese term. We don't just talk about thinking with the brain, not the Descartesian thinking, but the thinking comes from the heart and the mind at the same time. But we need to change our way of thinking / being.
Give me an example of thinking with your heart.
I think I was mostly trying to express the fact that they're not separate. The thinking and the feeling aren't separate from each other. But giving an example.
Because the heart does think.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, our body.
Well, there's actually this scientific data that's been emergent lately. I forget if I actually have it on my iPad somewhere. I think it's an Israeli scientist, but basically what they've discovered is that there are actually, the heart actually has its own mind.
Oh yeah.
And it actually has, we think that the mind impacts the heart. You know, like when they talk about the somaticization of disease, how stress causes people's heart attacks and this kind of thing. So they're always thinking of it from this kind of, dualistic Western idea about the, thinking and the feeling being separate, and the thinking being the higher order of things and the feeling being kind of subservient to that. But they've actually found that the brain actually responds to the heart as much as the vice versa. Even science catches up to this, sort of inherent holism that things like, it's not just Chinese medicine. I think it's just a lot of the ancient languages, and especially the Eastern languages, they all reflect, they don't have this dualism between thinking and feeling. And I think that, it's just more of a more modern Western kind of dualism that we've created, and that there's an inherent wisdom to these older languages that are just
absolutely
already in ancient China. They understood the body as a network of energy, and that health had to do with the appropriate balanced flow of energy through the body, and disease had to do with energy moving in ways it's not supposed to move, or stagnation of energy is in a way the biggest cause of disease, leads to cancer.
Stagnation of energy in different parts of the body.
Yeah, and there's a strong, and I think that's where something like Chinese medicine has a very strong understanding of how emotions are very, very strongly tied into that. They're often, you could say they're often the cause of a lot of diseases, because they cause, energy to stagnate in certain areas.
Okay, for example, liver. If there's stagnant energy in the liver, what emotion would stagnate the energy in the liver?
Well, anger is the emotion that's most closely associated with the liver. And actually, see, the liver really, so Chinese medicine talks about the liver isn't just the organ that we understand, it's a whole functional system. And those meridians go through the liver, which is why it's named the liver. But in Chinese medicine, the liver is actually the functional entity that's responsible for how energy flows throughout the whole body.
Oh, right, okay.
And so that's why that liver qi stagnation is considered, well, it's very common first of all in especially in Western culture,
that there's stagnation of energy through the liver meridians.
Right.
And that's caused by holding in anger or being angry, or what?
Well, I think these things are all interconnected, and so the stagnation could lead to anger. So even just really sedentary lifestyle, you know, some, and also people are all,
A
we're all,
sedentary lifestyle could lead to anger.
oh, absolutely.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have, you know, and also we have family history. You know, there's certain constitutions that you inherit from your family that predispose you towards maybe more of a liver imbalance, maybe more of a, you know, digestive imbalance, maybe
Yeah.
more of a kidney imbalance.
Yeah. It has a tendency through your inheritance to go that way, but it's not necessarily have to manifest, does it?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Because I hear a lot of, well, it runs in my family. Yeah, maybe it does, but if you don't do what your family did, you don't need to manifest it.
Right. It's just a tendency. And,
A tendency.
and we all have
A tendency.
we all have our, you know, we all have the capacity to bring ourselves into balance through, you know, the right exercise, the right diet, the right holistic care that we receive. And if we don't do that, then we get out of balance. And the way we get out of balance tends to adhere more to what our inheritance is, but it's, you know, different for different people.
Right.
Which is, I think that's also the thing that's maybe one of the gifts of Chinese medicine, is that it recognizes people's uniqueness a little bit more than the Western paradigm, which just treats the disease that people have. But in Chinese medicine, there's, you know, 1,000 different reasons why you might have a headache, or hundreds of different reasons why someone might get cancer, or whatever it is.
And very often these things, dis-ease, very often a cause of it is an emotional.
Yeah, it's a part of it. It's an integral part of it.
Yeah.
It's not, perhaps it's not just the emotion, but it's an integral part of it. That we don't.
Because the
consider.
emotions are, you know, we're controlled by our emotions, aren't we? I mean, I've seen times where this is my emotional opinion of something, and this is my rational opinion, and they're like two different people. You know, my mind does not agree with my emotional opinion, but my emotional opinion is what will dominate and create the action, because it's stronger.
Probably the emotional opinion is living in the body too. It's living in the cells of the body as a sort of somatic entity.
So how does that work with your practice as a Sufi?
Well, I think the thing that's been coming up for me lately, and part of this actually dovetails a bit with the last few years, I've been doing a lot more craniosacral therapy. And so I think what all of those things have deeply informed my sense of healing. And well, one of my great teachers actually talked about healing not as just going back to how you were before, but as creating a new ecology of being, was the term that he used.
A new ecology
of being.
Okay, describe that. What? Define that.
I think it's the idea that I think there is a meaningfulness in our lives, in all of the different things that we go through, including our health, our health concerns. And so I think that there's I think when we engage with our health from a more holistic perspective, it's not just our body. You know, it's really an opportunity for our entire being to go through a transformation. And so I think if you just fix somebody, you know, if someone's back hurts, if you just fix somebody, then their back hurts again in another however long. But if there's a transformation from a more fundamental level, then
from the root cause.
From the root cause. You know, and in Chinese medicine they talk about treating the the branch and the root. I think in craniosacral therapy, I think the thing that deeply informed me from that system is, I think, well, you could say that in craniosacral therapy, you drop into this such a deep state of healing and a deep state of unwinding all of the traumas and whatnot, that you're naturally going to access this whole other healing resourcefulness that will emerge. And
Okay. So,
and you could say this is really, and I think this is the thing. It's like, we're in Chinese medicine, we are trained in in sort of like the post-communist revolution style of Chinese medicine, and it's very practical and it really helps people. But I think that one piece that we lost is really having this connection to the sort of universal chi.
And
I think that's really what craniosacral therapy put me back in touch with, is that if you want to help somebody, you help facilitate their own internal healing process, which has a lot to do with connecting with this very vast, very big source of healing. And I think I think you can't help but be changed by this, not just in your body, but also in your awareness.
So something's not right, and holistically, if you're treated holistically, then it's an opportunity for a evolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can bring you to another level of consciousness, which means another level of living in the world, right? Another level of living in the world.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of religions are focused on doing, right? Like Sufism and Buddhism, and right. So how do you use that with as a Sufi? How do you facilitate that in your work for yourself and learning? I mean, we always learn from our patients, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's just amazing. So how do you bring that about, that transformation in yourself? I mean, when you're working with somebody, you've got to be finding it within yourself as you're working with the person, don't you?
Right.
Yeah. To tune in to that person. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think grounding is really important, of course, because I think that enables you to. Well, it enables you to not take on other people's stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it allows the healing process that occurs to happen on a higher order.
The healing.
This is why there's a strong connection between, healing and change and transformation, is that you do need to shift. If you want to help someone facilitate a deep healing experience, you need to shift your own awareness. Yeah, like or metabolic disorders like diabetes, it's so much about people's nourishment and so much about what was going on in their childhood with getting nourishment or not getting nourishment and how that shows up later in life.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the physical.
It's not just the physical.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the physical, but it's not just the physical.
Yeah.
Holistic means the physical and not only, and the whole picture. So in acupuncture, you go to the root cause.
Yeah,
And
you're working with the body's own, capacity to heal itself and regulate itself, and there's certain understandings of, meridians and points that, for example, like that's a good example, diabetes, that are good for good for the metabolism, change how the body metabolizes things, or good for the immune system. I did a lot of work over the years with AIDS patients and working on their immune system.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So what's the immune system emotionally?
That's a good question.
Because there's so
I should have thought of that. I've been working with it for so long.
So many people.
Well, it has to do with it has to do with the boundaries, of course.
With boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to do with the way that your body's setting up boundaries or not setting up boundaries.
So that would be.
Well, I would say on a practical level, which I have thought a lot about, is when you work with people who are HIV positive, you really have to work a lot with the shock, which is sort of like a kidney, that's more of a kidney kind of thing. That's a big piece because it's a sudden transformation that happened to somebody, and that shock is also impairing your body's ability to heal itself. That's the thing. Talking about emotions and immune. That's the thing that comes out. That's more. I mean, that perhaps is more of a initial stage kind of thing, but not that short of an initial stage. That's
In a lot of spiritual practices, shock is used, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
In Sufism, yeah.
Absolutely. No, and this is again. We were just talking about this about how illness. Healing isn't just putting someone back to where they were before, but it's using. Actually, I was working with AIDS patients right before all the antiretrovirals were coming into play, and This was such a great teaching for me. Working, especially in the 90s. People expected to die, and they really changed their life.
What has Sufism done for you? Big question.
Well, I think one thing I was just talking about before we started taping was that when I was younger, I was always wondering if I really should have gotten into Buddhism, because the Buddhists just had this one simple I mean, they have more than one practice, but there was a simplicity about their practice. And when I was spending time with my teacher, he was always he'd do the same practice, but he'd do it totally differently, and it was very frustrating.
Every time he'd do it totally differently.
Right, and then and I also I had another teacher who was an Advaita teacher who I met in India, and he was a non-dual teacher. And his advice was to everybody stop doing all their spiritual practices, because the relationship between spiritual practice and awakening was tenuous.
How is that?
Well, he believed very strongly, and this was from his own experience of awakening, that they just become another exercise of the mind.
The mind grabs hold of it and turns it into a habit.
It turns it into a thing. And it also turns it into an identity, right? You're a Buddhist, you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Sufi. And
turns it into an identity,
The real awakening is really something way beyond that. And so, but the Sufism really taught me this. It's the real spirituality is being able to live our lives, doing whatever we're doing, whatever work we have, serving people or having family relations. The real work is to be able to use those life experiences to wake up. And it's my teacher, he had a really high valuation for these sort of ascetic yogis that he met when he went on his pilgrimages into the Indian mountains. And so what he always told us is that we all have access to in a way, the people that have gone off and gone on to retreat, this is like a gift to humanity, because we can all access that state of high awareness, that sort of unbounded energy, but that the real spirituality is being able to access that and live a daily life. Because it's harder to live a daily life. So the sort of conundrums that we experience in our day-to-day life kind of become our like Zen koan. You know, it's like we have to be able to,
as opposed to sitting in a mountain meditating.
and it's a very non-dual thing too. It's like why is sitting on a mountain any better than, why is that more spiritual than living your life? And so it's that sort of essence of non-duality that actually, when I was young, I really wanted to be an ascetic, and I really wanted to just go off and, you know, follow some teacher who had a very sort of ascetic practice. And my teachers told me not to. I was mad at them. They kept on telling me, oh no, you can't just go off and meditate, you have to you have to go to college, you have to, figure out your job situation, you have to do all these things. But now I realize that it was a real gift to be to try and grapple with the contradictions of life while still
for example, how does grappling with the situation in life, the external, how did it change you internally? How do you work that? Because you could also interpret that as being a martyr.
Oh right. Right.
Just well, I'm on a spiritual practice and love and peace and service to humanity. That could be interpreted as martyrism.
Well, I think what it is I think when you're living your daily life, you realize that there, if you find this kind of absolute freedom amidst, having conflicts with people or having problems.
Yeah, but how do you find that? What are you talking about, absolute freedom? Where's that coming from? How did you find that?
Well, I think it always starts with a connection with something beyond your individual self.
So you found it.
It's like in the whole thing in transpersonal psychology is you need to connect with a bigger frame of reference. You can't solve your problems while you're in the middle of your problems. So by connecting with the bigger picture.
How did you connect with the bigger picture? What's the bigger picture?
Well, I mean, I think that I encountered the bigger picture through going on long retreats and through the process of meditation. And I wouldn't say I don't feel like those practices are an end in themselves anymore. I think that once you've touched into some of those, I think that there are states of consciousness where you experience a great unity, you experience a great interconnectedness, you experience this. You experience a deep sense of inner freedom. You experience great power, perhaps, or great peacefulness.
So what about if you've got a lot of pain and how, because the pain is much denser and heavier and louder than a connection to
sure
the spirit world, the invisible world.
Well, I think that there is. I mean, you actually find this a lot in a lot of the ecstatic traditions of Sufism and Hasidism, is that they talk about how the experience of pain and the experience of ecstasy are actually rather interconnected. And so if you're just if you're just experiencing ecstasy without opening yourself to the pain of the world, then it's not really a true, it's not a deep spiritual experience that lasts, because you can't integrate it into your life, because the moment you feel bad, the moment you feel depressed or physical pain, then you come out of it.
Yeah.
But I think in a way the opposite is true as well. It's like sometimes pain can guide us to, if we're willing to open to pain and be willing
so
to
change your perspective.
Yeah,
change your judgment, change your belief.
Right. I think that's actually where the Buddhists, in terms of pain, I always come back to the Buddhist thing, because they're very smart, because the basic, in the Buddhist psychology, the basic idea is that we're either running after something that's pleasurable, or we're trying to push away pain. And if you have pain and you're just willing to invite it in, or you're willing to sit with it, it's different than
what does invite it in mean? Or sit with it mean? How does that happen for you?
So
without being a martyr.
Yeah, well, I think that the experience of avoiding pain is this sense of rigidity, and this sense of not wanting, and this sense of pushing away. And so the opposite is a softening and an opening, and
so how do you not become a martyr
and
in
a
that?
Curiosity? You mean, are you talking about physical pain? Or just...
No, situational pain in your environment, people that are rude, or your boss is hammering you, or whatever.
Oh, well, that's something...
Life pain.
I think that's also, in a way, this is part of this, there's a sort of dualistic idea about what spirituality is.
Yeah.
And that spiritual people never get angry or never assert their boundaries.
Yeah.
Or I think that's more of what you're talking about, is that sometimes when people think they're really spiritual, then they never call their friends on their shit, or they never put up boundaries, or they don't get angry.
Yeah, they don't get angry.
And I think that it's like we all exist in the world, and there's different emotional responses that are appropriate, but I think that those responses have to come from, not just from your personality or from your ego being angry at somebody, but coming from a bigger place.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people need someone to get angry at them, because otherwise they'll never change.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually, this is a good story, because I totally had this idea that I met my spiritual teacher, my Sufi teacher, and he's this sweet older man with a snowy white beard, and he struck me a little bit. He looks a little bit like a mad professor. Well, he died, but the 23 years I knew him, he has a little bit of an air of a mad professor. Mm-hmm. But the first time, he used to give people what was called darshan, which in some Hindu traditions it's more of just a blessing, or someone bops you over the head. But his quote-unquote darshan was more like a spiritual reading. So I thought he's going to tell me how beautiful I am, and how great it is that I'm so young and I'm meditating, and he looks at me and he said, if I was a dervish, I would, grab your shirt, shake you, and tell you to wake up, pull yourself together.
That's his blessing.
And I was shocked.
I
was shocked. I was shattered. And not only that, but we were on some retreat in the mountains, and my body temperature jumped 5 degrees. For 24 hours, so that the people sitting around me had to move away, because I was burning. So so that's his. That's great. What a gift. This is a kind of an archetype in Sufism. Yeah. The archetype of the dervish. Yeah. Which is the holy. In India, I've seen this. But the holy man who wanders around in the city. Yeah. And sometimes they're stark raving mad. Yeah. Sometimes they're stark raving mad because they're intoxicated on God. Yeah. But they're not chatty, sweet people. They're actually
Yeah.
They're confrontative.
Yeah.
They confront the quality that comes through them is the quality of truthfulness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not in integrity and authenticity with yourself, that encounter with a dervish will shatter you.
Yes.
And people need to be shattered.
People
to
need
change.
to be shattered. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I've had a shattering in my life. Oh my God, yeah. One of the masters of my spiritual practice, went right in while I was in the middle of my pathology, totally unconscious, and I'm like, it just shook me to the core, and like for 2 months I was planning his assassination until I got enough distance to see what the gift was, and it really was a big transformation. It helped me so much to detach from myself and be able to be more in observation of myself, and of course life. Really amazing. Yeah. Those shocks are very, very important. It's like the people that thought they were dying of AIDS, that shock put them in a totally different realm, detached from themselves, from identifying with their I like, I don't like, I should, I shouldn't, I can, I can't, little personality.
Yeah, and it's one of the first questions in spirituality is, what is your value? What's really important to you? And then we get so distracted from that, and we get all caught up in our complaints or.
Yeah. So once you've been once you've been shocked enough or meditated, meaning seen enough of yourself, what's not you, then you can stay in that more or less, through the day in your life situations. Even if it's like 5 seconds a day, it's still huge, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I think the basic Sufi paradigm is that God existentiates himself through us,
right?
Which is partly what gives our life a deeper meaning, because there's an evolution that occurs because of our life. There's a transformation that occurs everywhere because all of us are here living our individual lives and waking up to waking up more and more.
So hello, God help. I'm talking about me.
Yeah, that's also why the Sufis are always getting killed, because it's a pretty anti-orthodox perspective.
Well, look, Jesus said it. If you want to know God, know yourself.
Right,
so he was a Sufi.
He had some good.
Sufi meaning the way, the road. It actually means wool, doesn't it? Something like that.
There's a few different versions of what Sufi really means. One version is that in the time of Muhammad, the cotton clothing was very popular.
Yeah.
And people were just starting to wear cotton clothes, but the more poor people, the more plain people, were living out in the desert and wearing this kind of rough wool. So that's why that had that connection. And they would sit around and they would sort of engage in these ecstatic rituals together, and
they're ecstatics.
Yeah.
So they do ecstatic rituals ecstasy is out of the norm, isn't it? It's on a much higher vibration. So what does that do to become an ecstatic? What does Carl Jung said that. You're either going to get, our nature is to get high. So you're either going to get high on the spirit of alcohol, which is spirit, or your own spirit. but it's our nature because it's evolution. Which is interesting, isn't it?
Well, I think that the ecstatic, well, first of all, I think it has there's a way that it integrates all levels of our being. It's like our body, our emotional being, our mental being. In a way, it transcends our mental being too. But it is the thing that gives us access to a different vantage point. I think that's why it's significant in Sufism. Is it
gives us access to a different point of view.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can well, that's what alcohol does, doesn't it? And drugs and everything. To me, working with people that are addicted to drugs or alcohol are actually looking for that higher state. They just do it in a self-destructive way. They do it in the personality instead of in the spirit.
Yeah. Well, the Sufis, they talk about the different kinds of wine.
And what does that mean? They don't mean literally wine, do they?
No.
Yeah,
well,
like
they like the Sufi poets are always talking about wine,
being drunk,
but the wine is the intoxication that you experience when you're, ecstatic when you're connected with the divine, when you're unified with the divine.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Also, when you're praying to the divine and having this relationship
with the divine,
having a longing for not feeling that connection when you're not connected.
Yeah. Which is you. Not you not connected to you.
Yeah.
And the universe, the whole universal that we are. That's fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Isn't that great?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was looking at the camera enough.
It doesn't matter.
I was looking at Azzah because she's such a beautiful face.
That's fantastic. That's a lot to digest there.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.